This video serves as feedback for the last part of the Introduction to Food Webs assignment, Part B, Making a Food Web. So the instructions are actually pretty clear in terms of what you're supposed to mark, but it does come with an understanding that you know what producer, primary consumer, secondary consumer, tertiary consumer are. So what they give you is instructions to draw your food web on a separate sheet of paper, which is what I did for you over here. And they give you all these food chains. And what you're to do is to use these food chains to build your food web. I'm not going to walk you through the whole thing, but I'll point out some very specific things I'm looking for in your food web. Number one, look at all these food chains. They're starting with the same thing. Just like in part A, how algae was the producer at the base of our food web, plant parts. Look at everything branching out from plant parts. I should see plant parts here as your producer. It's the only producer in any of these food chains. Directions say to the first arrow in any food chain between producer and primary consumer should be green. So here's what I did. I colored at the very end, and I just built the whole food web with my pencil first. And all you have to do is start with the first chain. So if I start with plant parts to land snail to mouse to raccoon, I'll show you what I first drew here. I drew plant parts and an arrow to land snail and an arrow to mouse and an arrow to raccoon. And I went back to my sheet. Plant parts to sparrow to hawk. Plant parts to sparrow to hawk. Then I went back to my sheet. Plant parts to rabbit to fox. So far, there's no overlap. We have different consumers in each food chain. So far. Plant parts to rabbit to fox. In our fourth food chain, we get our first overlap because fox shows up again. So watch what I did. Plant parts it looks like mouse is showing up again too. That's my fault. So plant parts to mouse to fox. I already had mouse and fox written down, so I don't need to mark them again. I just need to use my arrows. Plant parts to mouse to fox. And here's where you're going to start to see a lot more arrows being drawn. Last one. Plant parts to earthworm to robin to snake. I'm looking, do I see any other ones? Any overlaps? Doesn't look like it. Plant parts to earthworm to robin to snake. Now just a quick word about the coloring. I talked about the green arrows. Green arrows are from producers to primary consumers. So anything receiving energy directly from these plant parts will be connected from the green arrow. And eventually you're going to see quite a few green arrows because plant parts go to a lot of different organisms. The blue arrows are from primary consumers to secondary consumers. So here's what I did. I just looked at each food chain, and anytime there was a second arrow, like this arrow, I found it in my food web. So from land snail to mouse, and I just colored that arrow blue, the second arrow. Here's the second arrow, here's the second arrow, here's the second arrow. All of these are blue arrows in my food webs because it's going from primary consumer to secondary consumer. A couple of these food chains have, well, more than a couple, several of these food chains have tertiary consumers. 1, 2, 3 consumers. So I would just look at any of them with 3 arrows. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Let's see, what else has 3 arrows? 1, 2, 3. And I would make those arrows red. There's only one yellow arrow here. This yellow arrow is from a third degree or tertiary consumer to we can just say fourth degree consumer. And there's only one chain that has that. It's this one right here. Notice how this has 4 different organisms, 5 trophic levels, and 4 consumers. So this is the only yellow arrow in your food web. I hope that's helpful. Feel free to pause it and use it. This is practice, practice, practice. So when you are asked on an assessment to produce a food web, I expect this level of detail. So take some time to absorb this and check what you put down, and reach out if you have any questions.